joined us. We hope you're all doing well and safe. Thank you for your time and joining us for this webinar. I didn't introduce myself earlier. My name is Sarish Shuja, and I'm a marketing manager at McGraw Hill. And today we have with us a very special guest who's joined us, Greg Ritchie. Thank you so much for joining us, Greg.
You're welcome. So happy to be here, everyone.
Thank you. And today we're going to learn more about McGraw Hill's Social Studies program. This is a much requested webinar, which is why we were really waiting for people to join. But just to make sure they don't miss any part of this session. So in this session, you will guide you about how you can better utilize the impact in your classrooms by using the digital planning tools and the interactive resources, what components are included. So this is going to be a packed session. We don't have much time, yes, but we're going to try to cover everything that we can. And I'm your moderator for today, so I'll be here in the background. If you have any questions or any difficulties during this webinar, just use the chat box to let me know and I can help you out. As I said, we've got Greg Ritchie joining us today. It's 9 a.m. where Greg is joining us. He's in Portland right now. So, and it's, I know, 6, so 9 hours.
9 hours,
Yes. Greg Ritchie is a national K-5 social studies curriculum specialist for McGraw Hill. He's done a lot of sessions, workshops, in presentations for teachers, and he helps teachers get hold of impact social studies and how they can practically apply them in their classrooms, and lots of interactive activities and demonstrations. We're very lucky that Greg is able to join us today. So thank you, Greg.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Anytime.
Just before we move on and I hand over to Greg, I just want to cover a few housekeeping slides so we know that this all goes smooth. Well, we do recommend you close down any high networking app like YouTube or Netflix or any gaming platform, because this is most likely to affect the bandwidth of your webinar. You have the opportunity for a Q&A, so you can do this towards the end of the session, but feel free to drop in any question in the chat box. If you have any questions for Greg, you can write that down. He can pick it up during the presentation, or we can do it towards the end. You also have the recording of this session, so we will be sharing that with you. That's quite a requested, everyone does want a recording, so you watch out for an email that we will send out. You will also be getting a certificate of participation who have attended the live webinar today. This is going to take some time, so look out your inbox for the certificate. Sorry. We do want to make sure, lastly, that this webinar is as interactive as possible. So make sure you interact with us during the webinar. You can do this with the Q&A or the chat box. They're both located on the right side of your screen. You can use the Q&A box to any questions to Greg or myself, or if you want to interact with the audience, you can do that in the Q&A box. And I guess, yes, I hope you have a great presentation. I mean, you have a great webinar, and thank you for joining us today. I guess that's all from my side, and I can stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
Greg, you should be able to, amazing. Let me know if you need anything, okay? I'm here in the background for you.
I sure will. Thank you so much for that really great introduction for everyone. One question, so I'm going to turn the chat box off for myself so I don't get distracted by it. But if something comes up there and you feel that it should, any questions all along, for all the teachers that are watching, if you have any questions or you want me to repeat something or slow down or say something a different way, be sure to let me know and just put that in the chat box. And then if you want to communicate that to me, Sarish, you can let me know and you can ask those questions on behalf of them. Terrific.
Sure.
Well, everyone, welcome. Yeah, sounds good. Well, welcome everyone. And I'll just put this out there. I know there's a lot of logistics that have to happen and that have happened to get us all together to this point, which I'm very thankful for. If this is something you would like to happen again, because I know we essentially have 40 minutes until the top of the hour, I'd like to give you as much training and support as is necessary. So if that's more time after this, then I'm willing to do that, because that's, as a former teacher myself, I know the value of obviously having somebody give you little tips and answer the questions and all those things. So I really want to make your job as easy as certainly as easy as possible. All right, so with that, let me go. I'm going to skip a few slides here. I'm going to go to this slide right here and just talk about what my goals are for all of us today as we go along. One is, and these are pretty broad goals, like it won't really take much for us to deepen our understanding of impact. If I share with you one thing, well, we've already deepened it, but hopefully you'll learn more than just one thing today. I'm going to really go over those print components. As teachers, you probably know for the students, they have multiple student components. And like when I was teaching, that never happened for any subject, is you had more than one student book for the same subject. So I want to make sure you get some clarity around what each of those different resources and components is and how they work together. I'm going to touch on the digital. I feel like maybe if we ever met again, we could spend a little bit more time on the digital platform. We're not going to get to a ton of that today, but we can, or I can send you more materials for you to watch on demand as well in the future. The flexibility, you know, the time that you have to teach social studies is probably less than some other subjects, and it might be different for each of you that teach different grades at the school. Maybe you have 30 minutes or maybe you have 45 minutes. So it's really a neat curriculum, and I hope you've enjoyed it so far, because no matter how much time you have, you can take the lesson as a whole and put it into kind of an order and a sequence that's already there. You're not changing the order and the sequence of how to teach the lesson, but if you've only got 30 minutes, you can easily do this many things. Or if you've got 45 minutes, you're going to also do this much. So hopefully you'll see some of that, the way that the lessons are built and designed. And then at the end, like the whole purpose of this is really so you can plan and do your job even better with the instruction of your students. So let's talk about the agenda. First, we'll do an overview. I want to walk through a lesson with you, which will be the same for any grade. We'll look at the technology, some of the teacher support, and like I said, we'll plan. All right, so let's begin. Again, feel free to, I would say sometimes, like if I got to be with you in person right now, I would be seeing all of your lovely faces and I would say something like, is there any questions? But feel free to just put those to, just know that that's always my prompt for you, right? So if you have questions or if something sounds great and you love it, put that in the chat box too, so that I know that something was resonating with you. All right, excuse me. So let's start with the overview, and we're gonna do that by looking at the student components themselves and look at that pedagogy. These covers that I'm going to show you 3 covers. These are all from 3rd grade, but excuse me. But there's so many similarities between all of the grades. No matter what grade you teach, I liked how some of you shared what grades you teach, and I appreciate that. So no matter what grade you teach, there's always a blue book. And if you refer to it with your students as a blue book, that's fine, but it's an inquiry journal, and that's a consumable. And so it's, you know, the pages, as you know, are perforated. You get a new set of them every year, and students have a little bit more ownership of them than they do with a traditional hardcover book. But that's really where this idea of inquiry and beginning the instruction of a lesson really begins. And then you've got the red book, or the research companion. That's the hardcover book. It really has all the content in there that students dive into to meet the standards that you want to be teaching, to answer the essential question and do that research. Those 2 components, the blue one and the red one, the inquiry journal and the research companion, those are the 2 primary components. And then you've got this 3rd one over here on the right side of your screen called the Explorer magazine. If you've seen that, right, it's a thin component. It looks like a magazine. That's why we called it the Explorer magazine. I don't know if you've had this response from your students or yourself. Like, it's oftentimes the kids' favorite of the 3 because it's so visually appealing. There's graphic novels in there. There's a lot more pictures and images than text, but it has, it's thinner because it has content in there that's only connected to the chapter as a whole, not the lesson level. So when we do a lesson walkthrough in a few minutes, we're going to primarily focus on the first 2 components you see, that inquiry journal and the research companion. But we're going to do that, save that magazine. That's a great piece to bring in more content when we want to go deeper into the chapter and more. Okay. And then all that content, of course, is online as well. We have a nice digital platform where teachers and students can log in and see and access all that content. And then no matter how, what level of technology you have, how robust it is or how comfortable you are using it, you have the choice of being able to teach impact in different ways, using all the print or using all the online or not, however it is. So it's really an experience that can be tailored for you. Looking back to that idea of inquiry and thinking about that arc of inquiry that I alluded to a little bit ago, when we think about these components, that inquiry journal, right, that consumable, the one that I said was, the pages are perforated, that really starts that engage step of the arc of inquiry. We have these 3 steps: engage, investigate, and report and take action. And this one here, as we said, I'm going to fly through this. Sorry, I'm going to go quickly because I've already said some of that right there. But, this is where curiosity is going to be sparked. We're going to have graphic organizers that are going to be places for students to take notes as they now go in and do their investigation. That's that second step. And the primary piece, of course, is now that research companion. So these 2 work in connection with each other. And this is the primary piece where students are going to go in to really gather that content knowledge. Sorry to go quickly through those slides, but it's kind of a repetition of what I was expressing earlier. You've also got that magazine. So it really serves the role of a piece that students can go in and do their investigation at the chapter level. So big, broader ideas. Look at some of the things here that it says. Differentiation. So when we want to really maximize the learning for every student, this is a really nice piece because, like the graphic novels, for instance, those are written at a lower lexile level than other content. So and we have lexile levels, by the way, for all of the articles and stories that are in this magazine. So if that's something that's of value to you, let me know and I can get those documents over to you. So you can really differentiate and maximize the learning on those. Lots of different multiple perspectives and different viewpoints in there to really help engage the students. It's good for small group instruction, by the way, too. A lot of teachers use this magazine as a piece for, when you want to talk about something at a broad level. Or sometimes, you want to move through a chapter quicker. You just don't have the time to get through every lesson. Some teachers take the magazine and just use those articles and stories that are in there and maybe have one table group read one article, have another table group read another story, which are around the same big idea of the chapter, around that same essential question, and then come together and kind of flip the classroom and teach each other. So just some different ideas, and we can continue to talk about those even after today. And then the inquiry path of instruction for a lesson, if you've seen it in a lesson already, it actually ends in the inquiry journal. So this is the component here. When I've done trainings, I always say, keep the inquiry journal in the desk. Like if students have desks with all their books in them, that's how it was when I was teaching, or if they have a little cubby on the wall where they have all of their books, this is the one that they keep in there. My suggestion would be to keep the research companion and the Explore magazine, the red book and the yellow book, keep those on the shelf, just like the bookshelf, because you won't need them every day of instruction. But really, we're always going to be in this inquiry journal. And to wrap up the lesson, there's a little feature called Report Your Findings, where literally they're reporting their findings. They're reflecting and taking notes, thinking back to the essential question, thinking back to the inquiry project, really just wrapping up the lesson. They take a stand, they reflect, they share out all those things that you see there on the screen. Okay, so that's hopefully that was beneficial to you in terms of understanding why there's 3 different components for a student and a little bit like big picture idea of how they work and the role that each one has. All right, that's my goal or that's my hope for the last 10 minutes that I've been talking. Because otherwise you see 3 books and you're like, why is there 3 books? That doesn't seem easy to me. But actually, I've gotten to see it in person now at so many schools that I've gotten to go visit in the United States, at least, and see that it's really nice for the students and also the teacher to not have in front of them any more than what they need. Like they don't have this big book that has all this content that they're only going to be accessing 1 or 2 pages for that day. So I think it's nice to just really keep that inquiry journal as the primary piece and then bring in the research companion and the magazine for when you need. Or also, as you'll learn too, you can project the research companion. If you've got the good technology, you can project the ebook. There's a lot of ways to, as we know, to teach all that. All right, I'm going to skip that slide. So let's look at this if you want. And I see that some chat questions have come in, but I haven't been interrupted yet by Sarish, which you're absolutely welcome to interrupt me, but it sounds like we're doing okay and we can keep going, but let me just check in. Everything okay? I'm just gonna, any questions or?
So far, so good.
So great. Good. So far, so good. Great. Well, folks, let's walk through a lesson and hopefully this can be valuable for you. Actually, let me go back one slide. Yeah, just notice one thing. When I made this slide, I made the bullet point. I don't want to gloss this over, almost as a reminder of something that we've just learned. If you didn't know this already, IJ, that of course stands for Inquiry Journal, Research Companion, and then back to the Inquiry Journal. So think about, like, if I was with you right now, I'd say, I would quiz you, teachers, I would give you a quiz, and I'd say, why or what does this refer to right here? And what hopefully you've picked up again is when you work through a lesson, you're beginning in the Inquiry Journal, you then go to the content that's inside the Research Companion, and then you wrap it up with the Inquiry Journal. All right, and you've got some flexibility. So that's just one little reminder. Kindergarten, your title is called Learning and Working Together, and then we take that all the way up through 5th grade. And you can see all the books, like these are all the Inquiry Journals, and they all have that blue band across the top. So as you, like if you're a 3rd grade teacher, your students next year will have had a similar sequence, of course, using impact as a 2nd grader. So they'll be kind of familiar with the flow of how impact works. It's always this first year, it's this first time of introducing the content to yourself and to your students. It's always, it takes a little bit more time just because there's more of a learning curve. These are your chapters of study. So, in every grade, there's, 5 to 8 chapters. And then if we look at like a deep dive just into one chapter, this is the way it's structured, impact. So here's grade 3, for instance, you've got 6 chapters. And then if we just look at one chapter, let's just take chapter 5. That chapter is framed with an essential question, which I know you're all familiar with essential questions or compelling questions. And then inside that chapter, there's going to be a series of lessons. Here's 6 lessons, and each of these lessons go to support that chapter essential question. All right. And these are not, by the way, 6 days of instruction. Every one of these lessons takes several days to teach. And again, it's not our job to tell you exactly how many days, because we don't know how long each of you has each day to teach social studies. So that's up to you. So you've got some choice there, but the way that it's laid out, as we're about to see, kind of just makes it easy for you. So let's look at some screenshots. I'm just going to literally show you some screenshots. These are all from grade 3, chapter 5, but teachers in any grade, this should look familiar to you. If you've already begun using it, like even if you're a 1st grade teacher, the feel of this page right here, those 2 pages that I'm looking at from grade 3, that should look fairly similar because the flow and the feel and the style is similar across all 6 of the grades. So you begin there, we're thinking about engage. Let's actually tie it back to what we learned earlier, which is this whole idea of this arc of inquiry where we're engaging students first. So, we're engaging students with what? The essential question. Here's right below that. There's the chapter, kind of just a quick little chapter introduction for students. And then do you see this feature right here where it says talk about it? That's really intentional. And every chapter in every lesson, you're going to see that prompt that says talk about it, encouraging students to have that collaborative conversation with each other, build discourse in the classroom. It helps, as all of you know this, like it helps students, think about other students' perspectives. It'll ask them something like this one here just says, talk with your partner about what questions you have about governments and what it means to be a good citizen. Well, I may not have any questions about that if I'm a student, but then I look to my student, to my classmate, and they may have questions that I hadn't even thought of. So that just begins that curiosity process and helps spark that interest. So that's really going to be intentional at every chapter, at every lesson. Right now, we're looking at the beginning of a chapter. And then you've got this chapter inquiry project right here. This is a project-based learning activity. that can be really done over the course of like maybe a month. I mean, it's done over the course of the whole chapter. So it's not just a one-time activity that's going to take 30 minutes and you're done. You could probably do that if you want, but the way that it's written and the authors designed it was to really be completed over the course of several weeks, over the course of the whole lesson. And then I'm just going to literally just turn the pages right here. Here's some vocabulary. So every chapter begins with this 2-page spread. In kindergarten, if there's any kindergarten teachers on, I know yours is a little bit different. Sometimes the words are actually tied to a song. But generally speaking, 1st grade through 5th grade, you've always got this 2-page spread of, in this case, 10 different vocabulary words that are going to be introduced later on in the lessons themselves. But here is your quick introduction to them. This activity takes 5 minutes. Students, would all of you look at that word volunteer? Could you put a checkbox next to the box, or sorry, a check mark next to the box that most appropriately indicates your level of familiarity with that word? I mean, that's it, right? So students can say, I know that word, I've heard that word, or I don't know the word. Like literally no wrong answers right there, and then move on. Now, if you turn to the next page in an inquiry journal, any grade, any chapter, then now we're at the beginning of a lesson. So it always has those 2 pages that start a chapter, and now it has a couple pages, or now it begins the lesson. These questions right here, we call them the lesson outcome questions, teachers. This is based on some research that I don't know this person personally, but I've learned about him. His name is John Hattie, and he's done a lot of research into how students learn in the most efficient way. And one way is by thinking about what they're learning with the end in mind. So in this case, it says literally the what, the why, the how. What am I going to be learning? Why am I learning it? And how will I know that I learned it? And I always smile because I know like the students often would ask me, why do I need to learn this? Or why am I learning this? So it literally addresses that right at the beginning. And because that's a great question. And once they know why they need to learn it, they will often be better learners themselves. So that always begins every lesson. And then we've got this little spread right here. So this one's called Analyze the Source. Literally just part of a lesson. We're in the inquiry journal. You can see right here, right? So think about where we are. Okay, we begin the lesson in the inquiry journal. We're in there right now. This is the consumable. So students can literally take notes in here on their pages as they do, in this case, like some source analysis, or here's a primary source, here's text. Sometimes it'll be a secondary source or an infographic or a map. And we're gonna do this little routine of inspecting, finding evidence, and making connections, that 3-step routine with whatever that particular source is. All right, and then I can go to the next page, and the next page takes it's called inquiry tools, but it literally takes a strategy that you might also be teaching in literacy and language arts. And this is intentional, where we really try to integrate social studies and literacy and bring those skills and ideas like main idea and details, or sequence, or cause and effect, or whatever it might be. We bring those things that you're teaching in literature and bring them and apply them to the social studies content. So this is part of that. Now, I'm just going to pause here because before I start talking about this page right here, but think about this lesson so far. It's built of all these kind of, I don't know if you want to call them blocks. I've actually never used that word before. Parts is probably a better word. Parts of a lesson that all are fairly short on time activities. Like maybe they take, 10 minutes a piece or 15 minutes a piece. Like here, I'm going to go back one screen. Actually to this one right here. Like this part of the lesson right here, it's called Analyze the Source, right? So this might take, I don't know, it might take 15, 20 minutes. This might be all you do for one day of instruction. And then the students go on to math or whatever they have next. And then when you come back into this lesson, you're just literally going to pick up right where you left off and be able to start here. So just keep that in mind. I always stress this because what you don't see, for instance, is like one long lesson that takes, an hour or an hour and a half to teach. And you have to decide, okay, this is a good stopping point, or, you have to stop something in the middle of a story or whatever it might be. And it's kind of an awkward pause in the lesson instruction. Instead, you've got all these parts of this lesson, and then depending upon the time you have, you get through each part, as many parts as you can, reasonably in the time that you have, and then you just kind of pick up where you left off, or maybe you skip some, right? You don't have to do every part. Like maybe you're gonna skip this one, but just keep that in the back of your mind as you're continuing to think about how this is going to be played out in your classroom, if you will. All right, so let's just go on. So now look at this. There's a direct tie-in to the research companion. So here I'm in the inquiry journal still, but it literally shows an image of the research companion, because now students are going to go into the research companion to continue the lesson. And it said there, I think I skipped over it, but it said read pages 206 to 215. So that is 10 pages. So what you don't see, I'll show you as I click through the slides here, you are of course going to see what you do see. But what you don't see, for instance, is one 10-page story about democracy. Instead, look at what you do see. Here's almost 1 page or 2 pages about the history of the US Constitution, 1 page about the Articles of Confederation, another story about the Constitutional Convention, a little quick biography on Benjamin Franklin, right? And the point is that I'm trying to make is just notice that, again, if you've got 20 minutes for social studies, you can, I think this is a very accessible component and resource, because if that's all the time you have, great, you're going to read this one article rather than having to read this long story and try to figure out exactly how much of it you want your kids to read because you've only got 20 minutes or something. All right, hopefully I've made that point enough, but in a training like we're doing now, I always try to stress that for you as teachers. Notice this too, this thing on the bottom right, stop and check. This is what we call a formative assessment. It's a nice piece, even for students themselves, to just check on this, like discuss with a partner why the US Constitution was written. I mean, literally, if they don't know that at this point of the lesson, then they've missed something, or we need to teach something again or reinforce it, or whatever it might be. And then notice here too, find details as you read, add new information to the graphic organizer that we just left, right? That's your note-taking device as you are doing, as students, as you are doing this investigation, right? And I'm just turning the pages. Here we're on page 210, so we're almost to the end, but here's another 2-page story, another one. So, and you don't need to use all of these. If you don't have that much time for social studies, don't feel like you have to get through every one of these stories or put them in table groups. There's so many, all of you as good teachers certainly can decide how to best instruct from this content. But this is the look and the feel of a lesson and the way it operates right there. Okay. And then it'll look at this last one right here. Here's another stop and check. I like these prompts that, help make meaning. Like part of the purpose of Impact, or one of the goals, was to really connect history to the students' own lives. So it's like sometimes you'll see questions in here like, why is democracy important? And we might have different answers for that, depending on, or you compare it to certainly your own governments there in Egypt. All right, couple things. This is not part of the lesson, but I wanted to address 2 things that are in the research companion. Do you see over here? So I'm still in the research companion, but a couple things that are in here that I think are really nice is at the beginning of the chapter. So this is before, you can actually see it. What does it say? It says page 204. So before, I was at page 206, which is in a lesson. Here, we're just at the chapter level. And there's a couple things I wanted you to see. First one is there's this feature called People You Should Know, where we introduce students to 4 biographies, really quick biographies of people connected to the ideas that we're learning about. And then the other one is this more extensive piece of literature, and we call it connect through literature. So it's just, sometimes a 4-page story, 6 pages, maybe just 2 pages, whatever, that you are free to use or not use. But here in the US, a lot of teachers, especially in the younger grades, have kind of a reading block of time. Like maybe the students have just come in from the playground and you're trying to calm them down, and you might do a reading time. Perhaps you're doing that as well. And you are looking for a piece of literature or a book or a story to read. Some teachers like using this for that time because it's a good thing to do as maybe a whole class read aloud or just teacher-led instruction, but it connects to what we're learning about in social studies. Okay, So just a couple notes there. Now we're back in the lesson and we're literally at the end of a lesson. And as I introduced to you earlier, we end the lesson back in the inquiry journal with this routine called report your findings. And that's literally what they're doing. There's these 3 steps: think about it, write about it, and talk about it. Okay. And then online, by the way, all of this content is also presented in a format where students can literally just type in a box and submit those answers online too. So we could look a little bit of that today. I know we've just got about 10 or 15 minutes left, but we could also do that in a follow-up if you'd like. Now, I click to the next slide. Let me actually go click back one slide. So if you had your inquiry journals there in front of you, or you remember them from looking at them in the past, you've got this report your findings feature or part of the lesson. And this ends the lesson. I said that this was the end of a lesson. So now if I turn to the next page, it would be lesson 2. And think about if I was, actually, if I was there, I probably would quiz you again. And I'd say, okay, how does that lesson begin? And maybe one of you would say correctly, it begins with those lesson outcome questions, right? What am I learning? Why am I learning it? How will I know that I learned it? Okay, and I'd say, okay, what's next after that? Turn the page. Well, analyze the source. What's after that? Inquiry tools. What's after that? That's when we go to the research companion, and we go inside that research companion, and there's going to be about 4 to 5 stories and articles built around whatever that lesson question is, democracy or whatever it might be. Okay, what's after that? Well, that's when we come back to this right here. We wrap up the lesson with report your findings. So folks, that's it. That's a lesson as it's designed in Impact. And then again, just to say this one more time, you as a teacher take all of that lesson content, decide, maybe I don't need to do every story, or maybe I want to do every bit, and I'm going to piece it out in the number of days that I have based on how much time I have during that instruction. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. At the end of all the lessons, then there's this one spread here called Take Action. And this is an opportunity for you to have something kind of structured and in place for students to go back and think about that inquiry project that we began the chapter with. This is a little checklist here. Complete your checklist, share your project, reflect on your project. So, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? So that ends the chapter, and then we would begin chapter 2. All right. So that's a little look at primarily 2 of those pieces, the inquiry journal and the research companion. And the reason it seems like we're done, we're not done. I'm going to show you that Explore magazine in a little bit, but right now, but that magazine, again, as a reminder, isn't connected necessarily to each lesson. You can use that magazine and the content that I'm about to show you at any point in any of the lessons. It's kind of like, something that kind of is across the board, just bigger ideas connected to that chapter. Lots of different genres as well, as this indicates right here. You're going to find graphic novels, biographies, short stories, and more. And then if you want these documents to, let me know. Maybe you have already in the chat box. I can send these off if you'd like to see the Lexile levels of those pieces, of those stories. Okay, so if you haven't seen this already, or if you don't teach 3rd grade and you want to see a quick glimpse, I'm just going to go through this really quickly. But you can see there's my essential question, same essential question as before. And then look at my table of contents. It doesn't have, for instance, lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. It instead has just about 7 articles that all are connected to this big idea of the chapter. Here's a graphic novel. Here's a historical perspective. I love this. My mom was a librarian. My parents were both teachers too. So this is a nice look at a library and the way it used to be and the way libraries are now. One thing to notice as I scroll through another page, notice how long these are. They're all 2 pages long. It's like one open spread, or 2-page spread as I refer to them. And that's intentional. Like, we don't need to present students with, a huge piece of literature. I mean, we can, and that's important, but when we're talking about social studies instruction, at least here in the United States, it doesn't get as much, face time, classroom instruction time as things like math and English language arts. So so the purpose of this, the authors really tried to make it accessible for you as teachers, and then therefore for students. Here's a little, a short story about the dog wash and the helping hand. And it's, there, it brings in some of the vocabulary words that we were also introduced to at the beginning of the chapter. And then here's the end. So this is literally the end. We're always going to see like an infographic here. I love this too, by the way. Like, we've been learning about laws and governments and citizenship and symbols. So, in Minnesota, I don't know if you've ever heard of the state of Minnesota, but it's one of the states here in the United States, or if any of you have ever been there. There's evidently this little silly law that says if you want a hamburger on a Sunday, it's not allowed. There's nobody. So that's amazing to me. It must be true, or we wouldn't have it in there, but it's kind of hard to believe. But anyway, and then over here on the right side, we have this little routine or part of this chapter called Take Action, More to Explore. And it's just, I love this, right? Like, I'm sure as teachers, it's a time saver. You would probably, as good teachers, probably know to ask questions like this to your kids already. Like, okay, we've been learning about laws and governments. If you were a lawmaker, what would be a law that you would write for your government or for your citizens or for your country, right? Those are good, but it's nice. I say it's a time saver because we've tried to put all this in so that when you're preparing for a lesson, you don't have to come up with all this stuff on your own. It's literally just part of the lesson. So that kind of wraps up your look at kind of those three different resources right there. Let me just look at the chat box and see. Yes, please. Oh, perfect about the Lexile levels. Thank you, everyone. So feedback so far. Could you just put, I know there's a few of you on our call now. Any thoughts or so far, has this been helpful at all? Have I wasted your time? It's always, but put something in the chat box. Let me know if this has been helpful, if this makes sense, or great. Okay, good. Thank you. You all know how it is. I don't know how much virtual training good. Thank you, Esra. I don't know how much virtual training you did during the last 2 years. One of the challenges
feedback is really important to us. So, we know how this direction of the training is going to go. It's our first time actually doing impact training, by the way, Greg, for our region, especially in Cairo, I believe. So definitely of help, especially how to use the magazine part. Excellent. Thank you so much. Your feedback is, again, very appreciated. So do let us know if there's anything in particular you're looking for in impact. This is the time that you can ask Greg that, can you show me the magazines, or can you show me the Exile, or can you show me where I can find anything at all? So grab this opportunity and you can ask any questions to us in the chat box or in the Q&A. Happy for you to pick that up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. That's really helpful to know you're finding this session useful.
Yeah, really is. I really appreciate it. How much of an opportunity, how likely is it, do you think, Sarish, that we could do another session?
Heba, would you want to unmute yourself? We can do another session, or if you have time, we can continue this session. I know there's a lot that you had to show us and we couldn't get started on time. I'm sorry about that, Greg.
No, don't be sorry. It happens, and and I don't want to rush anything either. And I just ask because of course, there's 5 minutes to go, and I'd like to spend, I would like to in the future give you a little bit more about technology. I don't know if we could meet in the next even week or two and do some technology. And I just saw that last question that came up, and that's more of a question for somebody else in terms of students accessing the online. So maybe that could get figured out in terms of how students access their online accounts. And then we come back and do a little bit more depth in terms of the technology. What do you think?
I think that would make a lot of sense, Greg, because by that time they'd actually have their accounts and everything and would be able to log in and have a look at like a refresher, and then come back to you and be like, okay, great. We'd had a look at the online accounts and this is what I'm looking for. I think that's a great idea. Okay.
And I'm always wary too. Teachers, you could probably relate. I know it's the end of your day too. So thank you for being awake and alert after, I'm sure, a full day of teaching. I don't want to give you so much that you're then overwhelmed and you start to forget, or, all that sense of being overwhelmed takes over. So maybe if we just stop here, that was a good introduction. We did the lesson walkthrough. And then if we were able to meet again and find a time, we could just spend like another hour essentially and spend some time on the technology part.
Correct. I think that would be wise. We can spend more time on the digital side of this. But meanwhile, if you have any questions about the components or anything, you can ask us now.
Yeah, I'm glad to see it. I'm looking at the chat box, and it's nice to see the part. Yeah, thank you. Somebody says even specifically, especially how to use the magazine part. I'm glad that, because yeah, that's kind of a component. We even, and just so you know, who was that? Miriam, you said that, and there's probably others of you that thought the same. That's often just a question we got too, even from like when I got to introduce Impact to some of the sales team and the marketing team here in the United States. One of the questions was like, how does this magazine fit in? Because it's so different than any other student component. So I'm glad I was able to help with that a little bit. So I don't see any other questions, or how can I know the Lexile levels?
Yeah, you're right. You got that.
Yeah, I just see that right now. So what I'll do, if I email you a link to Dropbox, can you then share that link out with others, Cerise, so that all these teachers?
I can do that. There is a follow-up email that they're going to get with the recording of this webinar, so I can pop that link in the follow-up email that their participants are going to receive. Great. So that's the answer then, Samiha, and for others, you're going to see a link to Dropbox. If you're familiar with that, you're welcome. And click on that. It's a link to a Dropbox in my Dropbox folder. And one of the things in there, maybe I'll actually put a bunch of stuff in there. Don't be overwhelmed by it. But there's some nice, actually, yeah, I think I'll do that, because there's some other nice support pieces that are in there, like a fast tracks document. Let me actually why don't we just end with this right here? Sorry, I'm going to go back here. Whoops, darn it. I have this Mac and it's got this, hang on one second. It's got this little toolbar across the top where I can click right to another slide, which is really clever. So this is what I wanted to show you right here. And this will be in the Dropbox as well, teachers, what we call a fast track document. This may be of no use to you, and that's fine. But for some teachers, they have had questions of like, if I can't get through every lesson, is there some lessons that I should focus on and some lessons I can skip? And so we put that question to the authors, because that's not a question, like I'm not the expert. I might sound like the expert, but the authors who contributed all the content, they would be the ones to really answer that question. So we posed the question to them, and they responded by providing that. And so we put it into this document. It literally just does things like this, like, yeah, in chapter 3 or in grade 3, chapter 1, lesson 1, lesson 2, and then maybe lessons 3 and 4 you could do simultaneously, as it says. So anyway, I'll put all that. Yeah, so I'll put all that in that Dropbox too, teachers, and then maybe next time we meet, we can refer to this as well, and any questions that you'll have. Wow, I had no idea about the fast track, by the way, Greg. This is really good. Isn't that neat? It really is very neat. And then if you have, limited time or anything, you can actually pick up which lessons you want to teach. So this is really great. Yeah. Great resource. Yeah. And I put some other things in there, like a list of all the videos, like the next time we meet, teachers, we'll talk about technology more. There's all these really cool videos. So I've made a list of like all the videos that are in Impact, so what's there and everything. So thank you so much, Greg. Really appreciate your help there. You're welcome. Well, thanks everyone for being on and participating, and the feedback, and even just writing in the chats. I've appreciated that. Thank you so much, Greg, for your time and doing a very packed session, and giving us your morning. Thank you so much, and we look forward to having you again. Definitely. Great. Well, I'll watch that, and we can talk about when it was. Yeah. Yes, thank definitely. You. We'll take that offline and speak to you when we can align a session, a part 2 of Impact. We're definitely going to do that. And our audience, yes, you will get all the resources Greg is talking about. So watch out for an email that you will get the recording of this webinar along with those resources. And as for the certificate, we will be sending it to the participants who have attended the live webinar. I also do want to mention here, I don't know if this this is relevant to you, but we also are doing a network session next week. I'm going to drop the link in the chat box in case you want to register for this one. This is, again, social studies, but this is for grade 6 to 12. We're having a session next week on Tuesday. If you'd like to attend, I have dropped the link in the chat box. But thank you so much, everyone, for attending this session.
Thanks, everyone. All right. We'll see y'all later. We'll see y'all next time.
Take care. Bye. Thank you, Greg.
Bye. You're
Bye.
welcome.